And suddenly, President Trump announces this, well, extraordinary order. He's deploying 2 U.S. nuclear submarines to appropriate regions.
Yeah, and not through some quiet diplomatic channel either.
No, it was really public, a direct response, he said, to highly provocative statements from Russia's former president, Dmitry Medvedev.
Right, and what really makes you blink is where he announced it. Truth Social.
Yeah.
I mean, for these kinds of high-stakes strategic signals, you expect formal channels, maybe even classified ones, right?
Exactly, but this was out there for everyone.
So that's what our deep dive is about today. We're going to unpack this pretty dramatic escalation. We'll explore the war of words between Trump and Medvedev, look at the strategic context, and really try to understand what it all means for, global stability, nuclear deterrence.
Yeah, cut through the noise and get to what's actually going on for you. And it immediately raises that question, doesn't it? What does it mean when these incredibly serious announcements are made on, well, personal social media? Is it mostly a significant military move? Or is it really more about the rhetoric, a powerful statement?
Let's try and dig into that.
Yeah.
The immediate trigger, as you said, was Medvedev's statements. Now, Medvedev, he's had quite the political journey. President of Russia, 2008 to 2012, then prime minister. Now he's deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, which is chaired by Putin himself.
Right. And he's really shifted his public persona, hasn't he? Since 2022, especially. Used to be seen as more of a liberal figure. Now he's one of the Kremlin's most, well, outspoken hawks. Very anti-Western.
Extremely. He uses incredibly provocative language, even direct nuclear threats, often on social media, too.
Which leads some analysts to just dismiss him, right? Like an irresponsible loose cannon.
Some do, yes. But others, including some Western diplomats, actually, they see his words as reflecting perhaps thinking within senior Kremlin circles.
So, which is it? How should we read him?
Well, you've hit on something really crucial there. What specifically triggered this exchange was his social media post on August 1st. He warned Trump very explicitly not to ignore the peril posed by those he labels dead. And even more significantly, he referenced Russia's Soviet-era doomsday system, the fabled dead hand system.
Perimeter.
Perimeter, exactly. For anyone listening who doesn't know, it's this secretive sort of semi-automated system. It's designed to launch retaliatory strikes even if the leadership is gone. I mean, referencing that, it's incredibly ominous.
Wow, yeah, that sounds like a direct challenge. And it wasn't out of the blue, was it? Medvedev was responding to Trump's earlier ultimatums about the Ukraine war.
That's right.
Trump had set that 50-day deadline for a ceasefire, threatening huge tariffs, then shortened it to 10 or 12 days.
And Medvedev called that an ultimatum game. He said, each new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war, not between Russia and Ukraine, but with his own country.
So yeah, this back and forth, it feels like it's been building up.
It absolutely has. And what's interesting, maybe insightful, is this pattern with Medvedev. Despite his formal position, he's the one consistently making the most highly provocative statements.
Right.
Which makes a lot of people think he serves a specific strategic purpose for the Kremlin in its, well, nuclear signaling.
How so?
Well, by having a deputy chairman make the really aggressive threats, the Kremlin keeps a degree of, plausible deniability.
I see.
If the rhetoric blows back, Medvedev can just be painted as, oh, that's just his personal view, or maybe he's just trolling.
So it lets them test the waters, see how the West reacts, but without Putin having to commit directly.
Pretty much.
But it still carries some weight because of who he is, his past roles.
Exactly. It sort of amplifies the nuclear threat noise while letting Putin maybe seem more measured, more open to dialogue, perhaps.
Like a global good cop, bad cop?
Kind of, yeah. And that makes it much harder for the West to interpret and respond, doesn't it? It complicates things, maybe dangerously so.
Which brings us right back to President Trump's response. August 1st on Truth Social. He says he ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions, just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that.
And he added that line, words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances.
Okay, but the announcement itself, it was pretty vague on the details, right? Like what kind of subs? Nuclear-powered attack subs or the ones carrying nuclear missiles? And where exactly are these appropriate regions?
Exactly. No specifics. And, well, typically the U.S. military keeps those kinds of operational details classified. That's standard procedure.
Sure.
And that's where the expert analysis really comes in handy. Arms control folks, like Hans Christensen at the Federation of American Scientists, they were very quick to point out something crucial.
Which is?
That U.S. nuclear submarines are basically always deployed. Always. They're already out there. in places like the Atlantic. They're inherently capable of hitting Russia as part of the deterrent posture. The U.S. Navy has, 71 nuclear-powered subs, 14 of which are the big Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines. They're the core of the sea-based deterrent.
Okay. So the expert view is that this repositioning,
Uh,
it might not actually be a new operational move.
It seems less likely to be a major shift in operations and more of a rhetorical statement, a public signal using existing capabilities.
So the action is the announcement itself, made publicly.
Precisely.
And Trump framed it defensively, didn't he? On the basis of safety for our people, protect our people. He linked it directly to Medvedev talking nuclear.
Yes, he was talking about nuclear. When you talk about nuclear, we have to be prepared. That was his justification.
But does that work? I mean, if these threats are always seen as just words, does it start to lose its impact? Does it get normalized?
That's a really interesting point. It raises that risk, doesn't it? Over-publicizing maybe routine movements or making these vague threats without clear actions backing them up. It could, paradoxically, maybe dilute the credibility of future signals, ones that might actually be more serious.
It creates confusion, increases the risk of someone misreading the situation.
Absolutely. It definitely increases the overall risk of miscalculation.
And if we zoom out a bit, U.S. Russia relations in 2025, they're clearly terrible, at an exceptionally low point.
Rock bottom, pretty much.
Trump came in hoping to normalize things, end the Ukraine war. He even voted against that UN resolution condemning Russia's invasion initially.
He did. But Russia kept pushing militarily, especially in Ukraine, and that seems to have really soured the mood in Washington.
Yeah, leading Trump to completely reverse course, threatening tariffs again, sending more weapons to Ukraine. His frustration over the peace talks not going anywhere seems palpable, like it's driving a lot of this.
I think that's a fair assessment. And it's not just Russia, is it? He also criticized India for its close ties with Russia economically, suggested they could take their dead economies down together. It fits his wider agenda of reevaluating alliances and reducing U.S. reliance on others.
It's all connected, a complex mess.
Definitely.
And meanwhile, the nuclear arsenals, despite reductions after the Cold War, they're still huge, right? Very high level is how C. Prater put it.
Yeah, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, their numbers for January 2025 show the U.S. with about 1,419 deployed strategic warheads, Russia around 1,549.
And both sides are modernizing their forces, too.
Constantly. Which brings us to arms control. What about the guardrails? Are there any left in this kind of environment?
That's the really worrying part, isn't it? The New START treaty.
Exactly. The last major nuclear stability agreement between the U.S. and Russia.
It's technically still in effect until February 2026, but
its implementation has been suspended by both sides since 2023.
So those guardrails you mentioned, what did they actually do?
Well, think of them as vital safety checks. Things like regular data sharing on how many warheads and missiles each side had deployed, verification measures, inspections.
So you could actually check the numbers.
Right. And crucially, there was something called the Bilateral Consultation Commission, the BCC. It was a formal, quiet channel where both sides could raise concerns, ask questions about unusual activity, clarify things.
And without that,
it's like flying blind in a storm. The risk of misinterpreting something, of making a wrong move based on bad information, it just goes way up, especially when things are already this tense.
So instead of quiet channels, we have this war of words, getting really personal insults flying between Trump and Medvedev.
Yeah, bypassing those established routes.
How does that personalization change things? Does it make it harder to de-escalate because it becomes about ego, about winning the argument?
I think it absolutely does. When you mix domestic politics, personal jabs, and nuclear rhetoric, it just makes the whole international scene far more unpredictable, much more dangerous. That line between, say, political posturing and a genuine strategic threat gets incredibly blurry. And that's where mistakes happen.
And the reactions to Trump's submarine announcement, they were interesting too, weren't they?
They were. Noticeably, right after Trump's post, there wasn't really a coordinated official response from the very top in Russia.
No big statement from the Kremlin or the Ministry of Defense or Foreign Affairs?
Not immediately, no. Which might suggest they were maybe trying not to escalate officially, or perhaps they were still trying to figure out what Trump's announcement actually meant militarily.
So the reactions came from lower down?
Yeah. Lower-level officials, state media figures, like Viktor Podolatsky, a lawmaker. He claimed Russia had significantly more nuclear submarines and that the U.S. ones have long been under their control.
Adding, let the 2 U.S. subs sail. They have been in the crosshairs for a long time now. Pretty aggressive talk.
Very. But then you had others, like Fyodor Lukyanov, a well-known foreign policy expert in Russia. He basically downplayed it, called it social media showmanship, an emotional reaction from Trump.
He even suggested the U.S. military might have been surprised by the announcement.
Right. He concluded that, for now, it was staying only at the level of words.
Which brings us back to how we interpret these things. The arms control experts, what was their general take?
Well, they largely agreed with Lukyanov's assessment, essentially, that it was more of a rhetorical threat rather than a military one. Hans Christensen, who we mentioned earlier, he confirmed it was an escalation of rhetoric, maybe tensions, but he stressed again, U.S. nuclear subs are always deployed.
And the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation, they put out a strong statement.
He did. John Tierney, their executive director, really emphasized that there is no such thing as casual language about nuclear weapons.
He called Trump's back and forth with Medvedev inappropriate and unhelpful, didn't he? Stressing the need for a steady hand.
Yeah, warning against letting anger at a personal insult risk escalating to a dangerous situation. A very direct criticism.
And the Nuclear Threat Initiative, NTI, they echoed that concern.
Profound concern, yes. Hoping the heated nuclear rhetoric doesn't become a case study for unintended catastrophic consequences. And they pointed directly at the lack of New START guardrails, saying the risk of miscalculation is much higher now.
Citrai, too, warning about a dangerous new nuclear arms race because the arms control structures are so weak.
It all paints a pretty bleak picture of the current state of affairs.
And this pattern you mentioned earlier, this normalization or desensitization to nuclear talk,
Yeah.
Medvedev constantly wields nuclear threats. Russia makes so many nuclear threats that the West began to consider them to be just words. And Lukyanov calling Trump's move showmanship. What happens when this kind of language just becomes background noise?
That's a critical question, and it really is like the classic boy who cried wolf story. If you keep issuing nuclear threats, especially vague ones, without any clear follow-through, you risk eroding their fundamental power, their deterrent effect.
So a real warning might get missed.
Exactly. A genuine, serious signal might be dismissed or underestimated because people are just so used to the rhetoric. It could even embolden an adversary. And just the act of talking about nuclear weapons so casually, so often, especially on informal platforms like social media, it lowers the bar. It makes the unthinkable seem a little less unthinkable.
There's that old saying, isn't there, about words being bombs in this context.
In this game, words are bombs and silence can be a scream.
Yeah. A veteran negotiator told me that once. Feels incredibly relevant right now with all this noise.
And the shift itself, using these informal, personal social media spats for what used to be highly formalized strategic communication, that feel like a huge erosion of norms.
It really is. I mean, is this the future? Leaders sorting out nuclear brinkmanship on Twitter or Truth Social? It sounds almost surreal.
But with serious implications.
Very serious. The brevity, the informality, the ambiguity you get on social media. It just massively increases the chance of misinterpreting intent or red lines. It's the total opposite of a carefully drafted diplomatic note or a structured arms control talk where every single word is weighed.
So breaking down those old norms just makes managing crises even harder.
Fundamentally undermines it, heightens the risk of miscalculation, of unintended escalation in a world that's already on edge.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. As we finish this deep dive, what are the key takeaways for you, the listener? What does this all mean? We've seen President Trump's submarine order framed as this direct military response. But expert analysis suggests it's probably more of a powerful political signal, a rhetorical move.
Right, especially since those U.S. nuclear subs are, as we've heard, always deployed anyway. And we've talked a lot about how this war of words has gotten so personalized, moving away from traditional diplomatic channels towards social media.
And that informality, plus the fact that New START is basically suspended, it just makes the risk of miscalculation much, much higher.
And that point about normalization becoming desensitized to nuclear rhetoric, that's really concerning, that boy who cried wolf danger, where real threats might get ignored or maybe rhetorical ones get overreacted to. It's a dangerous dynamic.
Which leaves us, I think, with a pretty important thought to mull over after this deep dive ends. If leaders increasingly use these informal platforms, this often ambiguous language, for nuclear signaling, how can nations tell the difference between real intent and just well, bluster.
Yeah, how do you make that call accurately?
And what responsibility do leaders have?
Yeah.
Especially when, as Trump himself said, words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences, particularly when you're talking about weapons this powerful.
It really does make you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About how vital it is to try and rebuild some of those clear communication channels, those arms control guardrails in this incredibly volatile time. Clarity, caution, the stakes just feel unbelievably high right now.